You lie still, wrapped in the hush of night. The air is cool and quiet, soft against your skin. Above you, the sky opens wide, a vast canvas of darkness dotted with stars, and among them, glowing gently, the moon watches. She does not flicker. Like the others, she glows steadily, tenderly, her face turned always toward you, as though she's been watching for a very long time. And below you, though you cannot see it now, the ocean stirs. Even in the dark, it moves, slowly, steadily, as if it breathes in its sleep. The waves do not crash tonight. They roll and hush, a lullaby that belongs not just to water, but to time itself. There is a quiet link between these two, the sky's pale guardian and the earth's great blue heart. You cannot see the thread, but it is there. A pull, a draw, a whisper across the distance. The moon does not shout. She does not push or tug with force. Instead, she reaches out with the softest fingers, invisible, constant, and the sea responds. You imagine the ocean like a sheet of silk, spread wide across the earth. As the moon passes overhead, that silk gathers beneath her, lifted ever so slightly. It swells, not in chaos, but in rhythm, a slow, rising breath that follows her arc across the heavens. And when the moon moves on, the sea sighs back into itself. You may have stood at the shore before, feet sinking into sand as waves rolled. Around your ankles, you may have noticed the tide, high some days, low on others, not thinking much of its pattern. But tonight, as you rest in stillness, you begin to feel that pattern like a heartbeat, pulsing gently beneath the surface of things. Above you, the moon floats silently on her path. Her face is calm, though she is not still. She is always moving, orbiting Earth in a long, looping waltz. She never hurries. Her pace is patient, deliberate, and the ocean, though vast and wild, listens. It listens to the moon's position, her motion, her quiet call across space. The sea is a great listener. It has no eyes or ears, but it knows how to respond. It lifts when the moon draws near. It falls when she drifts away. This relationship is ancient, older than any map, older than any word. Long before ships sailed or poems were written, the moon and ocean danced in time with one another, and still they do. You might think of gravity as a weight, something heavy that pulls things down. But here, in the softness of night, you begin to feel it differently. Not a weight, but a connection, a silent invitation. The moon's gravity doesn't grab the sea. It holds it, as a mother holds a child close, not too tight, not too loose, just enough to sway the waters gently, endlessly. You can almost hear it, if you're quiet. The sigh of salt water pulled from shore, the pause, the return dot somewhere. In the rhythm of that rise and fall, there is comfort, there is peace. You are reminded that the world turns, not in chaos, but in quiet coordination, in patterns. We often forget to notice, and what happens to the sea happens to you in some small way. Your body, too, is mostly water. Your tides are subtler, but they are there in your breath, your blood, your sleeping thoughts. You, too, are pulled gently by the moon's presence. You are not separate from this story. You are in it, floating quietly in its pages. So much happens beneath the surface. The sea appears still, but deep within it moves in layers. Currents twist far below, following paths shaped by the moon, by Earth's spin, by heat and salt and time. Tonight, though you stay near the surface, where moonlight brushes waves, like fingertips, and where tides whisper their secrets in the hush between heartbeats, it is not urgent. The ocean is never in a rush. It does not chase, it follows. It listens, and as you begin to drift, you feel your thoughts start to loosen, to sway with that same rhythm, in and out, pull and return. The moon, the ocean, and you all moving together in a quiet, unseen thread of connection. You are reminded that the world is more gentle than it sometimes seems, that above the noise and weight of the day, there is a quieter truth, one that moves slowly, always, without needing to be seen. Now the tide begins to turn. The moon continues on her path, and the sea adjusts, patient and sure. There is more to understand, more to feel. The moon's influence is strong, but not hers alone. Another presence, brighter, warmer, watches from farther away. A second voice joins the dance, one that shares the sky with the moon, and soon you will begin to hear it. To the distant golden gravity of the sun, you rest, cradled gently by the earth. Though you do not feel it pressing in, you are being held, softly, constantly, in the arms of gravity. Not pulled, not yanked, but embraced. There is no sound to it, no motion you can name. And yet, without it, you would drift away. This is the quiet presence that wraps itself around everything you know. Gravity, it is not harsh, it does not demand, it simply stays, holding stars in place, shaping planets, keeping oceans in their beds, keeping your feet upon the floor. You may picture gravity as a thread invisible, woven through space, connecting all things. Every object, large and small, tugs gently on every other. It is the universe's way of staying in touch, of never letting anything feel alone. You feel Earth's gravity all the time, though you rarely think about it. It holds your body to the ground, your breath inside your lungs. It is the soft weight of the blanket on your chest, the feeling of being anchored even while your mind begins to drift. But tonight, you begin to feel something more, something larger, because Earth, too, is being held, not by strings, not by ropes, but by a soft, silent pull from the moon. The moon, though so far away, is forever reaching toward Earth. Her gravity touches everything, every drop of water, every grain of sand, even the trees, even you. But her pull is not strong enough to lift you into the air. Instead, it calls to what flows most easily. The ocean's water listens. You begin to imagine it, the moon's gravity brushing across the globe, coaxing the seas to rise. Not all at once, not like a splash, but like breath expanding in the chest. Slow, measured, calm. The ocean answers not with noise, but with movement, and not just where the moon is above. On the other side of the earth, water rises too, pulled by a different kind of motion. Not the moon's direct tug, but the earth's gentle sway beneath it. The result is a balancing act, a pair of high tides reaching out like open hands, one toward the moon, one away. This is gravity's embrace. Not just a single hand holding tight, but a shared motion, a balance between two bodies, dancing slowly through space. You feel how gravity does not command, but suggests. It does not demand, but guides. And this guidance is everywhere. Gravity keeps the moon in orbit around the earth, not falling into it, not flying away, but caught in a constant curving path. A path that never ends. A path shaped by love, by patience, by an unspoken agreement to stay near. You may think of a stone on a string, spun in a circle. The string pulls inward as the stone swings out. It is held in place, not by walls, not by chains, but by the tension of connection. So too with the moon and earth, one circling the other, both locked in an invisible link. And through this orbit, through this turning, the moon's gravity never stops whispering to the ocean. Rise, it says, fall, rise again. There is something comforting in this, the regularity, the gentleness. Tides come and go, not in surprise, but in rhythm. You could set your heart to it. The tide is never early, never late. The moon is always near enough to be felt. And gravity is not only between the moon and the earth. The sun joins this silent conversation. Its pull larger, though its distance is vast. The sun, the earth, the moon, each feels the other's presence. Each one sways the other's paths in ways both subtle and grand. But tonight, your focus stays on the moon, her quiet devotion, her steady gaze, her willingness to pull entire oceans closer every day. Without rest, you begin to understand how the sea is not pushed or poured, but lifted by love, by closeness, by the softness of attraction. Gravity is a word we often associate with weight, with seriousness, but here it becomes something else, something warm, something tender. You picture yourself afloat in the sea, your body rising just slightly with the tide, not pushed upward, but guided, nudged, as though the water itself is answering a call you cannot hear, but can somehow feel. This sensation is everywhere, all the time. You are never outside of gravity's arms. Even now, as you lie still, you are part of this grand, slow movement. Your body is small, but it is not left out. The moon sees you. The earth holds you. The sea moves beneath you. You might imagine gravity as music. Low, long notes that play beneath the melody of life. You don't need to hear the song to dance to it. You already are. And when you think of tides, think not of water being forced, but of it being invited. The moon extends her hand, and the ocean rises to meet her. The pull is not a command. It is a gesture, quiet, graceful, constant. Even when the moon is hidden by clouds, or resting during the day, her pull remains. You may not always see her, but the sea always feels her presence. The earth always turns in her direction. You rest more deeply now, wrapped in the understanding that you are never unheld, that there are forces beyond your sight, soft and sure, that keep the world turning, the water flowing, and you gently in place. Gravity is not a crash, it is a cuddle. It is the reason stars form, planets spin, and tides return. It is the invisible glue of the universe, binding all things in quiet unity. And though the moon's pull is the gentlest nudge across the vastness of space, its effects are mighty. It lifts entire oceans. It shapes coastlines. It breathes life into the rhythm of the sea. You begin to wonder how that rhythm works, why the ocean rises not just once, but twice each day, why water seems to know when to come and when to go. There is a secret in the symmetry, a beautiful mystery of how tides form, not in one place, but in two, one drawn close, one drawn away. The moon is no closer tonight than she was yesterday. Still, her presence feels near, gentle, glowing, steady. She does not change her path, nor raise her voice, yet all the oceans listen, and you begin to notice it now, not just a feeling, but a pattern. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. Twice each day, with the quiet confidence of ancient memory, the water lifts and retreats, not in haste, never in haste, but with a rhythm older than words, older than maps, older than names for the sea itself. The moon does not touch the water directly. Her hands never reach the waves. Instead, she pulls at them from afar, not with ropes or cords, but with gravity. That invisible invitation we've come to know as the universe's softest whisper. As the moon moves across the sky, the ocean follows. Or rather, the water leans in her direction, drawn not upward, but outward. Imagine the earth wrapped in a thin shell of water. As the moon glides overhead, this watery skin swells outward, toward her like a slow breath drawn in, but it doesn't stop there. On the far side of the earth, the side opposite the moon, another swelling begins. It seems impossible at first. How can the water rise in two places at once? Yet it does. Not because the moon is pulling it directly, but because the earth, pulled slightly toward the moon, leaves that water behind. It's as if the moon whispers to one side and the other side, not wanting to be left out. Sways in sympathy. These are the twin tides, two domes of water stretching out in opposite directions, held by a combination of gravitational pull and the Earth's motion. As our planet spins, these bulges of water stay mostly aligned with the moon, and to someone standing on the shore, it feels like the sea is rising to meet the moon, then falling away again. High tide comes when you're underneath one of these, gentle swells, and low tide when you're between them. Every day the tide lifts and lowers, like a deep breath drawn in sleep, a breath taken not by the sea, but by the whole Earth and Moon system, each part moving in quiet response to the others. You begin to picture it now, the Earth slowly turning beneath the moon, like a dancer turning under a partner's steady gaze. As the land rotates into the swelling water, it feels the tide rise. As it turns away, the tide ebbs. It's not a perfect circle. The timing shifts a little each day. The moon, after all, is moving to orbiting Earth in her own slow spiral. She takes about 27 days to make one full trip around, but because the Earth is spinning beneath her all the while, the tides don't repeat every 12 hours exactly, but closer to 12 hours and 25 minutes. A quiet reminder that nothing in the sky is frozen. Everything moves. This constant motion is what gives birth to the tides, not the presence of the moon alone, but her dance with Earth, her orbit and ours, layered together into a rhythm of rising and falling water. You can almost hear it, like a pulse just below the silence. At the shoreline, this movement becomes visible. You might remember walking a beach in the morning, seeing rocks that were hidden the night before, pools glinting with trapped fish, lines of seaweed drawn in curves across the sand, a soft signature left by the moon. Or you may have stepped into the water just after sunset, feeling it climb your ankles, your knees, even while you stood still. The moon's pull was there, lifting the water inch by inch. You did not need to see the moon to feel her presence. The sea felt it for you. This motion is strongest where water can move freely along wide coastlines, in deep ocean basins, through open straits. But it changes everywhere, shaped by the land beneath and around the sea. Some tides are tall and bold, rushing far up beaches, while others are faint and quiet, barely touching the shore. Still, the moon's influence is there in every case. Even when the sea seems calm, even when the water lies still in a sheltered bay, the pull exists, a quiet longing between the sky and the sea. And just as the ocean follows the moon's lead, so do animals, boats, and even calendars. Fishermen watch the tides, Crabs bury themselves and wait. Certain flowers open when the tide is low. The moon's tide is not just a movement of water, it is a rhythm of life. There is a stillness to this knowledge, an assurance that even when things seem unchanging, the world continues to move, that the moon, from her perch in the sky, keeps pulling the ocean close, not out of need, not out of force, but out of a steady, silent connection. And here you lie, listening to this slow ballet of gravity and water, feeling how the tide is not a wave that crashes, but a breath that flows, not a sudden leap, but a drawn-out pause between motion and rest. You begin to understand the sea not as a single body, but as something always shifting, always becoming, something that listens deeply, responds slowly, and remembers the moon. And even when the moon is far from view, even when clouds veil the sky or the sun takes center stage, her orbit continues, her pull endures. This leads your thoughts to another rhythm, another kind of tide, quieter, softer, yet still deeply felt. A tide shaped not by the moon alone, but by a second voice in the sky. A tide that rises when moon and sun speak in harmony, their combined pull shaping waves with a shared song. You lie still, your breath soft, your body held by the earth beneath you. Above, the moon continues her slow circle through the sky, silent, glowing, loyal. Below, the ocean listens with equal silence, rising and falling, not in chaos, but in rhythm. It's a rhythm you're beginning to feel now, not just in waves or winds, but in something deeper, the quiet symmetry of movement and balance. There is a truth here that surprises many each time the moon pulls the ocean toward her. The sea doesn't just rise in one place, it rises in two, not once, but twice. Each day, the Earth's oceans swell outward, one tide reaching directly toward the moon, and another on the far side of the planet, as if the water there is pushed away in answer to the pull. You pause here, imagining this delicate duality. One tide is easier to picture. The moon draws the water near, and the ocean rises in that spot, like a lover leaning into a familiar embrace. But the other tide, the one on the opposite side, that one feels more mysterious. Why does the water there rise too, even as the moon turns away? To understand, you begin to picture the earth not as a rock beneath your feet, but as something soft, something surrounded by a flowing, shifting skin of water. Imagine the earth as a dancer spinning in the arms of gravity. The moon, ever faithful, circles nearby, pulling gently at the surface of the sea. And wherever the moon's pull is strongest, the water stretches toward her. But now, let your focus drift to the far side, the part of Earth turned away from the moon's gaze. Here the moon's pull is weakest, and the water is left behind, ever so slightly as the Earth is drawn forward beneath it. This is not a tug-of-war. It is not a push or a shove. It is the result of motion of the Earth, the moon, and the water between them, each one moving in its own gentle way. And so, while the ocean bulges toward the moon, it also bulges away, a twin swell, rising in quiet defiance, shaped not by force but by inertia, the same way water in a spinning bowl gathers at the edges. The ocean too responds to the spinning of Earth beneath the pull of the moon. These two tides are not exactly equal, but they mirror each other closely. Together, they form an elegant loop of motion to rising curves on either side of the planet, following the moon's path, always just a little out of reach, like twin shadows cast by light you cannot see. You may feel a soft awe as you picture this now, the earth turning slowly under these tides. Each coastline meeting the water at different times. Each harbor and bay rising and falling in steady conversation with the sky. There is a quiet lesson here. 2. Balance does not always mean stillness. In the natural world, balance often looks like motion, like two tides on either side, rising not to cancel each other, but to complete the whole. The moon does not have to choose which side to pull. She pulls, and the ocean answers everywhere. One side drawn close, the other echoing the motion from afar, and so the tides roll in, and then roll out, a soft duet playing across the skin of the earth. You imagine standing on a beach at low tide, sand damp beneath your toes, tide pools, gleaming like mirrors, somewhere far across the globe. The water is high, waves pressing gently against a different shore, drawn upward by the same moon, responding to the same quiet pull. Everything is connected, not just in space, but in time, in the timing of tides, the orbit of the moon, the spin of the earth, all overlapping, all guiding one another. Even the tide's delay, that extra 25 minutes each day, is part of this symmetry. As the moon moves in her orbit, the earth must turn a little farther to bring the same point back beneath her influence. The result, each tide arrives a little later each day, a slow drift in time, like footsteps echoing behind a passing song. You feel the beauty in that delay, not a flaw but a feature, a sign of movement, of distance, of the vastness we live within. It's easy to think of tides as water simply rising and falling, but now you know they are more than that. They are the earth's way of answering the moon, not with a single voice, but with two, one from each side. There is something deeply comforting in that. The idea that no place is forgotten, that every stretch of sea is included in the moon's quiet invitation, and so the tides continue in and out, a breath held by the planet, a rhythm shaped by a distant companion. Each tide reminds you that harmony does not need to be still. It can be motion, it can be change, it can be two opposite things held gently in the same embrace. Tonight, you rest in that embrace. You feel the soft tug of the moon, the slow turning of the earth, the twin tides circling beneath you like arms wrapped around the world. And as your thoughts begin to slow, you wonder how this tidal dance is shaped by more than just the moon. You wonder what happens when a second presence steps into the rhythm, a larger light, farther away but powerful in its own quiet pull. You rest with your eyes closed, still and quiet. But beneath you, the earth is turning, not hurriedly, not with noise or tremble. She turns with grace, a slow, ceaseless twirl that carries oceans, mountains, clouds, and you round and round through the velvet dark. This spin is gentle, and yet it shapes everything. You begin to imagine the earth, not a solid rock, but as a dancer wrapped in layers of silk. Her arms outstretched, her gown flowing, she pirouettes through space, steady and constant. And as she turns, the water around her moves, not separately, but as part of her dance. The tides are born of many things. The moon's pull is strong, and the sun's is growing nearer in your thoughts. But tonight, you drift into another part of the story, the way Earth's own turning molds the rhythm of the sea. You are familiar with the cycle. The tide comes in, the tide goes out. Twice each day, the water rises, guided not just by celestial gravity, but by Earth's rotation beneath it. It helps to picture this, the twin bulges of water, one drawn toward the moon, the other trailing behind, hovering, almost fixed, as the Earth turns underneath them. As the planet spins, each place on Earth rotates through these bulges, passing through high tide, then low, then high again. Not because the water is rushing toward the land, but because the land itself is moving into and out of the arms of the tide. It is a quiet revelation that tides do not chase the shore, but the shore moves into the tide. You begin to feel it. Now, the slow turning of the world beneath you, carrying you gently into the next tide and the next. There's comfort in knowing the rhythm is not hurried. It unfolds on time, with patient regularity. Earth takes just under 24 hours to complete one full turn. But because the moon is also moving, orbiting slowly around Earth, each high tide arrives not exactly 12 hours apart, but slightly delayed. A tide today does not return at the same hour tomorrow. It comes about 50 minutes later, a graceful pause in the rhythm, like a dancer waiting for her cue before stepping back into place. This delay isn't a flaw. It's a sign of harmony between moving bodies. It reminds you that in this vast ballet, timing is shaped by the interaction of many partners, the Earth, the moon, and the flowing sea, and Earth's spin does more than mark the passage of tide. It adds a curve to water's path, a soft deflection born from the turning of a sphere. Scientists call it the Coriolis effect, but tonight you need no terms. You only need to feel the motion, the way currents spiral and twist as the Earth turns beneath them. In the northern half of the world, water curves one way. In the southern half, it turns the other, like the hem of a gown that sways differently depending on the step. The sea follows the turn of its partner. This spiraling motion helps shape the tides, especially in the open ocean, where vast slow rotating systems of currents move in wide arcs across entire basins. It's not just up and down, rise and fall. The sea also swirls, gently, eternally, in tune with the planet that holds it. You may not feel the spin. There is no breeze, no tug in your limbs, and yet you are moving fast. At the equator, Earth spins at over 1,600 kilometers per hour. But you feel nothing because everything turns with you, the air, the sea, the sky, your body. Stillness, it seems, is just a kind of shared motion, and in that shared motion, time is born. Our days come from this rotation, the rising of the sun, the falling of night. Our clocks are built on this spin. Our lives tick forward in tandem with the twirl of the Earth, and so do the tides. You see now how time and tide are bound together, not just by the moon or the sea, but by the Earth herself, spinning steadily beneath a sky that is always watching as she turns. Her gentle wobble shapes the rhythm of days and waters alike, a rhythm you belong to, a rhythm you can feel if you listen quietly enough. So the next time you watch the tide come in, you might imagine the Earth turning beneath your feet, bringing you forward into the waiting arms of the ocean, the way a dancer turns into her partner's embrace. There is beauty in this invisible motion, in knowing that the sea rises not from rushing, but from turning, from timing, from trust. And just as the Earth shapes the movement of tides, so to do others in the sky lend their pull. You've felt the moon's gentle guidance. Now a second voice calls stronger, brighter, pulling from far beyond the clouds. You lie still, wrapped in the quiet of night. Above you, the stars shimmer faintly, and the moon glows with her familiar light. You've come to know her rhythm, her steady pull, her soft influence over the tides. But now your thoughts begin to drift farther, reaching beyond her silvery presence. For there is another partner in the sky, vast and powerful, who joins this ocean waltz, the sun, though you cannot see him now. Not in this cool hush of night, he is always there, burning silently beyond the horizon, his light hidden, but his pull unbroken. You feel it, not in heat or brilliance, but in balance. The sun is a force that does not rest, a quiet hand that reaches across millions of kilometers, tugging at the earth, the moon, and every drop of ocean between. You begin to imagine it, the sun as a second dancer, larger than all the rest, yet never overpowering. He does not replace the moon's soft lead. He joins her in a duet that spans sky and sea alike. Together they move the tides. You already know the moon shapes the ocean's rise and fall. But the sun, with his immense mass and steady gravity, shapes them too. Though he's farther away, about 400 times farther than the moon, his pull is strong, nearly half as powerful in tidal influence. And when sun and moon align standing together in the same direction or facing one another from opposite sides of the earth, their gravity combines, pulling in unison. This is when the tides grow bold. These are the spring tides, not named for the season, but for the way the water springs higher and falls lower than usual. You feel it as a fullness, a deepening of the tide's breath. The moon and sun, speaking in harmony, draw the ocean farther out and in. Imagine a full moon rising above a dark sea, while the sun sets behind you. In this perfect alignment, Earth sits between them, and both celestial bodies pull the sea outward in opposite directions, creating tides that reach farther across sand and stone. Or picture a new moon, invisible in the sky, rising and setting with the sun both standing together side by side. Their combined gravity focuses on the same part of the sea, lifting the water in a quiet crescendo of tide. In both moments, full moon and new moon, the result is the same stronger tides, higher highs and lower lows, as if the sea is listening more intently, following the amplified whisper of the sky. But there is balance, always. Not long after spring tides come their gentler siblings, the neoptides. These occur when the sun and moon form a right angle in the sky, pulling the ocean in different directions, softening each other's influence. The water does not rise as high or fall as low. It moves modestly, with restraint, as though pausing to catch its breath between stronger swells. This cycle, spring to neap to spring, repeats every 2 weeks, a soft rhythm layered within the daily rhythm of tides. You may not notice it unless you're watching carefully, but it is there, steady as heartbeat, and so the ocean listens to more than one voice. It responds to the moon's graceful orbit, to Earth's gentle spin, and to the sun's unwavering presence. Together, these celestial bodies shape the dance of the tides, not in conflict, but in concert, not in noise, but in harmony. You may think of them like instruments in a trio, the moon with her delicate strings, the earth with her steady drumbeat, and the sun deep and resonant, adding warmth and depth to the song when they play in unison. The music of the tides swells. When they play in counterpoint, it softens, but does not stop. There is always movement, always rhythm, always a reason the water knows when to rise. And you, lying here beneath it all, are part of this quiet symphony. Your body feels the pull, though you may not sense it directly. The fluids in you, the rhythms of your breath, the steadiness of your pulse, all shaped in some subtle way by the same forces that move the seas. It is a comforting thought that even across vast distances, the sun and moon find a way to speak to one another, and in doing so, shape the world below, not through storms or violence, but through gravity, that invisible thread that links all things. You begin to wonder how this shared motion affects the land itself. After all, the ocean cannot move freely everywhere. Shorelines curve and bend. Bays cradle the water. Mountains beneath the sea shape how the tide flows above. The stage on which this dance unfolds is not flat, and the water must learn the shape of its container. You lie on soft sand, listening to the sea as it breathes in and out, sometimes with broad, confident swells, and at other times with gentle whispers that skim the shoreline. Tonight, the ocean's voice seems to shift between boldness and hushed retreat, as if it is speaking a language of its own, one that you are learning to understand. The tides, you discover, have moods. When the moon and sun stand in alignment, their combined cores pull the ocean into a higher, fuller response, and the water surges with purpose. These events, called spring tides, do not have anything to do with springtime. Instead, they symbolize the way the sea seems to spring to life, pushed and pulled with greater force as the sky's partners unite. You imagine the water rising, filling creeks, coves, and inlets with renewed vigor, touching rocks that are usually buried beneath gentle waves. Yet just 2 weeks later, a different pattern emerges. When the moon and sun form a right angle from the Earth's point of view, their gravitational calls partially cancel each other, and the ocean listens more softly. These are the neap tides that ebb and flow in gentler arcs, as if the sea is pausing to reflect between the moments of greater passion. Here, the water rises less and falls less, moving with a quiet grace that feels almost shy compared to the robust energy of spring tides. You find beauty in this ebb and flow of intensity. It is as though the sea's heart beats in rhythms of strength and softness, inviting you to rest within its balance. You may remember watching tide pools at low tide, where tiny creatures emerge in secret gardens of rock and water, exploring spaces that appear only when the tide retreats. Then, as the tide returns, you see those creatures vanish, safe once again under the protective arms of the sea's blanket. In the first moments of a spring tide, the moon beams down upon a shore brimming with life, awakened by the extra swell. Shorebirds forage in newly exposed sands, hermit crabs scurry to higher ground, kelp forests sway closer to the surface, and shells glint in the rising water. Later, as the neap tide approaches, the sea seems to lighten its touch. The water retreats further back, revealing hidden channels and nurturing different kinds of life in shallower pools that linger under a softer sky. Through these alternating patterns, you sense a deeper lesson about balance, that sometimes strength is needed, and sometimes restraint offers its own quiet power. The moon and sun take turns guiding the water with different levels of insistence, and the ocean responds accordingly. Yet neither pattern, neither bold crescendo, nor gentle diminuendo is permanent. Each flows seamlessly into the next, creating a cycle of transformation that mirrors the cycles of your own body and breath. You begin to notice how this cycle of spring and neap tides is woven into human history and culture. Ancient mariners marked their calendars by tidal rhythms, knowing that safer passages and fuller harbors awaited them at certain times. Coastal farmers planted certain crops by neap tides, when the water's reach was steady but not overwhelming. Even festivals and rituals aligned with the peaks of spring tides, celebrating the exuberant rise of the sea as a symbol of renewal and abundance. And yet, despite all our knowledge, the sea retains its element of mystery. You cannot predict every detail of each tide rogue. Waves can still surprise, and local geography can sculpt the water in unexpected ways. The sea's response to celestial alignment is shaped by hidden contours, submerged valleys, ancient ridges, and shifting sands that give each coastline a unique voice. One place may feel the pull of a spring tide as a powerful surge, while another feels it as a gentle nudge. This heterogeneity reminds you that the dance between moon and sun is universal, but its steps vary with the shape of every shore. You turn your gaze inward, sensing how your mind follows the ocean's alternation. Thoughts surge with the spring, tide-bright ideas rising to the surface, then recede into calm reflection with the neap tide's softer pull. In this meditative state, you appreciate the rhythms that are older than humanity itself, masterpiece painted in both space and water across the globe. Coastal landscapes transform dramatically between spring and neap cycles. Estuaries open wide during spring tides, revealing the paths of rivers that meet the sea. Mudflats stretch like grey carpets, inviting migrating birds to feed on invertebrates exposed by the deeper pull. Conversely, during neap tides, these same estuaries shrink, revealing hidden salt marshes, where sedges and grasses purify the water and cradle juvenile fish sheltered from the open sea. In tropical waters, coral reefs respond to these tidal moods with subtle shifts. At spring high tide, waves rush over the reef crest, bringing food and nutrients that sustain reef communities. Fish glide in with the flow, while invertebrates filter the water in the deeper channels. Later, as the tide slackens toward Naya, the reef flats emerge under warm sunlight, supporting algae grazers and crustaceans that thrive in shallow pools. Even in polar regions, the tide's dual nature reveals its power. Sea ice edges melt and refreeze in time with the spring surge, carving channels through the flows. For polar bears and seals, hunting grounds shift as ice drifts back and forth, following the celestial rhythm. In these frozen places, the cycle of tides weaves with the cycle of seasons, creating a mosaic of shifting textures and shapes on the sea's surface. Beyond biological realms, geologists witness the tide's mark on the land itself. Over millennia, spring tides etch rock faces and sculpt cliffs. Fossilized tidal rhythmic layers of sediment laid down by rhythmic tides serve as records of ancient Earth-Moon dynamics. Scientists learn how the distance between Earth and Moon has changed by measuring these bands, finding that the Moon drifts away at about 3.8 centimeters per year. You marvel at this cosmic fingerprint, impressed by how gravity writes its story. In stone and sea, the spring and nape dance is not just a nightly or fortnightly display, but a tale told through eons, preserving the memory of planetary motion. In each grain of sand, in each ripple of water, lies evidence of forces ancient and unbroken. In your quiet reverie, you notice the subtle tension in the tide's transition. The change from spring to nep is not abrupt. There is a phase, a shifting geometry as the angles between sun, moon, and earth adjust. The water seems to hesitate between full-hearted surge and gentle whisper, finding a place of equilibrium before moving into its next expression. This pause offers you its own serenity, moment to rest between extremes. It reminds you that in natural cycles, transitions are just as sacred as the peaks and troughs. You feel a comforting stillness in that delicate balance, a place where neither push nor pull dominates, but both exist in harmony. As you drift closer to sleep, you carry with you the image of the sea, breathing deeply in and out, shaped by spring and neap. You imagine the countless lives touched by these tide sea turtles hatching under a spring high tide, setting their flippers into a world of promise. Intertidal snails sheltering in crevices during neap low water, awaiting their next moment of exploration. You think of ancient poets who saw in the tides a symbol of human emotion, passionate love swelling like a spring tide, and gentle contentment receding like a neap's calm ebb. You sense how the language of the sea has guided artists, philosophers, and dreamers, weaving its influence through culture, myth, and art. Tonight, you rest in that tapestry, a single thread in the collective story of Earth's waters. You feel gratitude for the moon and sun that guide these tides, for the silent force of gravity, and for the planet that spins beneath their watch. The ocean's dual tides become your lullaby, a song of balance and change, strength and softness, unity and diversity. You notice that even your heart echoes these tides its beats, quickening gently with moments of imagined surge, and then settling into calm as you relax further. Your breath deepens, following the ocean's cadence as it flows from vigor to rest. In this quiet harmony, you sense the world's orchestration, where gravity's design weaves all life into an interplay of energy, beautifully balanced. And tonight, as the tide flows ever gently toward the shore, you wonder how the land itself joins this dance, shaping the water's song in every quietly moonlit bay and cove. You walk along the water's edge, toes sinking softly into wet sand as each wave retreats in a gentle sigh. The shoreline welcomes the tide's embrace and bids it farewell with a song of shape and sound. Each coast has its own melody, curves of bay whisper in low tones. Rocky headlands send sharp echoes, and sandy beaches offer a smooth refrain. Imagine the shoreline as a shoreline singer poised to shape the sea's voice. When the rising tide meets a broad, gentle beach, it rolls in like a hushed harmony, each wave fading softly as it touches the sand, where jagged rocks jut into the water. The tide crashes with staccato notes, scattering droplets that glitter like musical notes in moonlight. In hidden coves, the water tiptoes in quiet lullaby under the shelter of stone. Every bay and inlet is an instrument in this tidal orchestra. Estuaries, where rivers meet the sea, hum with the voice of flowing water joining the ocean. As the tide rises, it carries river water backward, sculpting delicate patterns in mud and reeds. As it falls, it withdraws with the river's flow, creating channels that twist like calligraphic strokes across the land. You can hear these echoes of land against sea if you listen closely. The gentle roar of waves in a wide bay differs from the soft hiss of a lagoon. Each pattern of tide and rock, of sand and shell, contributes to a coastal chorus shaped by the moon's influence and guided by Earth's spin. The song changes with the seasons as wind and weather add their voices. A storm may raise the seas, chord to a dramatic crescendo, while calm days leave a peaceful hum underneath the water. The shape of the sea floor plays its part too. Submerged reefs and sandbars bend the tide's melody, forcing water to dance over hidden ridges. When the tide flows over these features, currents swirl in spirals, creating places where small fish and shells gather in acoustic stillness. You might imagine these as secret verses, sung in a quieter key beneath the main chorus. On rocky shores, tide pools form small stages for marine life, These pools capture the tide's gift of water, then release it again, echoing the cycle of rise and fall. Tiny anemones clap their tentacles like applause, while sea stars extend their arms as if reaching for an encore. Each pool sings its own song of survival and shelter. In sandy shores, waves draw lines that trace the ever-changing baritone of water on earth. The beach's slope shapes the wave's descent, so that, in some places, the water leaps upward in bright soprano ripples, and in others it flows in deep bass sweeps. You might follow the lines left by the last high tide network of ridges and channels that look like the veins of a leaf, or the arms of a quiet river branching through the sand. Coastal cliffs and dunes stand like silent conductors, directing the tide's motion. They keep the sea at bay, yet yield to its pressure in gradual exchanges of sand and stone. Over centuries, the tide's persistent touch carves rock faces into arches and caves. You can imagine the echoes inside these hollow chambers, where each wave's knock resonates like a drumbeat in a hidden auditorium. As you wander these shores in your mind, you notice how each coastline offers its own invitation to the tide. A wide plain welcomes a rolling swell. A narrow inlet traps water in secret loops. A rocky promontory deflects the flow with dramatic flair. The tide responds to each invitation, shaping patterns of foam and spray that delight the senses and calm the mind. This interplay between land and sea reminds you that the world is a collaboration of forces: gravity and motion, water and stone, sky and earth. The moon's call moves the ocean, but the ocean always answers in partnership with the land it touches. Each shoreline's song is a conversation between brittle rock and fluid water, softened by sand and steeped in time. You feel the hush of wind carrying salt and spray across dunes of grass, and taste the cool on your lips as the tide draws back. You sense the pulse of currents guiding pelicans and seals, the ebb and flow that shepherds feeding schools of fish into tidal flats. This is nature's chorus, a living music shaped by the curves of coast and the schedules of the sky. Harbors and piers also become part of this coastal ensemble. When you imagine a wooden pier stretching out into the water, you see it as a conductor's baton, guiding currents along its length. Water flows beneath its pilings in measured pulses, and eddies swirl in their shadows like hushed corners of a concert hall. Breakwaters line the entrance to harbors, protecting vessels from rougher seas, while shaping waves into gentle rolls that lap quietly against moored boats in salt marshes. The boundary between land and sea becomes soft and yielding. Tidal creeks carve delicate veins through grassy flats, filling at high tide and draining at low. These wetlands act as sponges, absorbing the sea's flow and releasing it slowly, buffering the reach of waters inland. You can almost hear the grasses whispering in the water, each blade bending to shape the passage of tiny waves. Mangrove forests sing a different song. Their tangle of roots weaves a lattice under the water, trapping sediment and calming the tide's passage. Over time, these roots build islands of earth that rise above the high water line, creating new coastlines shaped by the interplay of biology and flow. You imagine the roots as strings on a harp, each one contributing to a chord that supports fish, crustaceans, and shorebirds. Where rivers meet the sea, you find liminal places, estuaries that shift with every lunar cycle. You picture ships guided by tidal currents, floating in the gentle push of spring tide, idling in the softness of Nipe. Pilots aboard these vessels read tide tables as musicians read sheet music, charting courses that follow the sea's timing. Beneath these modern sounds, the tide's ancient melody still plays. On rocky coasts, where waves meet sheer cliffs, you sense the raw power of water shaping stone over millennia. Each tide brings small fragments of rock into the shallows, then carries them away again, polishing them into pebbles that sing with touch. Sea caves deepen as water hammers at their lips, creating chambers where echoes amplify the tide's whispered calls. In tropical shores, coral atolls add their own voice. Live coral forms ridges at reef edges, breaking waves into foaming lines that spill into protected lagoons. These lagoons respond differently to the tide, their shallow floors warming in sunlight and spilling heat into the open ocean with each ebb. At night, bioluminescent plankton light the water in glowing trails, turning every wave into a brushstroke of turquoise light. Even human architecture sometimes merges with the tide's song. Tide mills once dotted coastal rivers, using flowing water to grind grain. Their wooden wheels turned in sync with the tide's rise and fall, a mechanical dance powered by gravity's pull. Today, a few restored mills still whisper once more in moonlit reflection, their wheels marking the cycle of water and time through all these variations. The shoreline's song remains one of collaboration between land and sea, between biology and geology, and between human craft and natural rhythm. Each curve, each feature, each structure adds its timbre to a vast, continuous performance. And you, listening here in the hush of evening, become part of this chorus the moment you let your thoughts settle into the melody as the tide slowly slips backward, revealing new shapes in sand and stone. You feel the shore's voice receding into deeper blues. You sense the coast singing its final verse for the night, preparing to rest until the next rise. Yet beneath your feet, under the waterline that now lies beyond reach, currents continue to flow, channels twist and hidden. Slopes guide the return. You know there are deeper realms where the shoreline's song gives way to a subtler chorus. Far from the luminous shallows, the deep ocean murmurs with its own tide's internal waves that travel unseen beneath the surface. There, water moves in layers deep as continents, shaped by gravity, density, and the silent architecture of submerged mountains and trenches. And as the shore falls quiet, you prepare to drift into the open blue, where the sea's whisper becomes even more hushed, yet no less full of wonder. You descend beneath the surface, shedding sunlight as you sink into deeper blue. Each meter carries you farther from shore, until the familiar song of breaking waves gives way to a hushed murmur. In this place, the ocean breathes softly, drawing in and out in rhythms you cannot see, yet feel in the slow pulse of hidden tides. Here, the sea is not ruled by wind or surface waves. Instead, it moves in secret cycles called internal tides. They are born when the moon and sun tug not only on the water above, but on layers within the ocean itself. Imagine the sea as a layered cake, each stratum of water varying in temperature and salt. When gravity calls, those layers shift, rising and falling in a subtle dance beneath the waves. You float in this deep blue, weightless and calm. You sense the water around you swaying, though your body drifts without effort. Vast underwater mountains and valleys guide these internal tides, just as shorelines shape surface waves. Currents surge along submerged ridges, then slip into hidden troughs. The motion is slower creeping swell that travels hundreds of kilometers without ever breaking the surface in your mind's eye. You follow a ripple of deep water as it rises against an underwater slope, then cascades down the other side like a whispering waterfall. You feel the gravity of the moon as an embrace felt through kilometers of water, gentler but persistent. The ocean's hidden valleys funnel the tide's movement, creating corridors of flow that pulse in time with the celestial rhythm above. As you drift, you imagine layers of water gliding over one another. The cold, dense depths slide beneath. Warmer layers, creating shear that stirs nutrients from the abyss. These nutrients feed creatures in the twilight zone, strange fish, glowing plankton, and silent squid that drift in the gloom. Even here, in near darkness, life moves with the heartbeat of internal tides. You think of how these tides whisper secrets to the deep. They carry heat and chemicals, shaping the ocean's chemistry over vast distances. Like veins carrying blood. Through a body, internal tides transport oxygen into the depths and bring up nutrients to the sunlit surface. They connect remote trenches to coral reefs, forging links between life above and life below. This hidden motion travels endlessly, day after day, century after century. Sonar experiments have mapped these internal waves as they snake through. The sea like ghostly mountains. They can tower hundreds of meters high, yet pass unnoticed by ships above. Their energy is immense enough to stir the ocean on scales as grand as the world's continents. You feel small in comparison, yet comforted by the ocean's slow breath. Here, time moves differently. Minutes stretch into hours. You measure time not by the ticking of a clock, but by the pulse of water layers rising and falling. In this deep realm, you learn patience, how the world holds its secrets beneath a veneer of calm. The pressure around you rises with depth, yet you feel no fear. The water cradles you, just as the moon cradles the ocean. In this suspended quiet, you understand that tides are more than surface events. They are a symphony of movement that reaches into the planet's very heart. As you begin to rise, carried upward by a gentle internal swell, you carry these whispers with you. The layers of the ocean release you near the edge of sunlight once more. You break the surface in calm waters, where waves lap softly against the hull of a passing ship. Above, the moon still shines, guiding both the surface tide and the deep. You rest in a small boat, the sky wide above you. The surface seems still, yet you know that beneath your keel the sea continues its hidden song. The internal tides will persist long after your journey ends, pulsing through abyssal plains and midnight trenches, shaping the ocean's soul. There is wonder in this unseen world, a reminder that the ocean's story is written in layers, each word a ripple, each chapter a wave. You feel gratitude for the depth and breadth of this living planet, for the paths of water that connect you to distant shores and ancient seas. Now, as night deepens and your boat rocks in gentle swells, you think of how tides have shaped life. From the very beginning, long before humanity walked the shores, organisms rode the first tides in primordial pools. Their cells were molded by cycles of wet and dry, by the push and pull of lunar gravity, teaching them the rhythms of the world to come. Your breath matches the ebb of unseen currents. You understand that the deep ocean's whisper is part of a larger story, tides of time that have sculpted countenance and guided evolution. You sense that beneath every wave lies the memory of ancient oceans, of moons long past and shores long vanished. And as you drift toward sleep, you carry the echo of internal tides, a soft promise that the ocean's whisper will continue its song in the depths you cannot see, and in the world you will tomorrow explore. You close your eyes and drift backward through time, carried on waves of memory that predate humanity itself. In your mind's eye, the moon hangs much closer in the sky, its silver face filling more of the heavens than you can imagine. Its gravity grips the young seas with a fierceness that lifts oceans higher than anything seen today. Twice each day, great swells surge across primeval shores, surging and retreating in rhythms both powerful and regular. In these ancient oceans, the tides were not a gentle breath, but a full, deep inhalation and exhalation of the planet's earliest heartbeat. These waters lap against coasts that do not exist, now shores of continents still forming, land masses not yet shaped by millennia of erosion. You find yourself standing on the wet edge of a primordial beach where volcanic sands glint under the glare of a moon that seems almost close enough to touch. The air tastes of metal and salt, warmed by a young sun. Here, the tide's reach is immense, far more than your feet can follow. The wave crests crash against rocky outcrops that will one day become mountain ranges, then pull back, exposing vast flats of wet ground that teem with opportunity. In those exposed flats, life stirs. Tiny cells, simple and new, respond to the changing tides. At high water, they sip nutrients brought in on the wave's crest. At low water, they taste the minerals left behind in mud and rock. These microscopically small organisms begin the slow work of transforming their world, creating oxygen, building mats of living tissue, layering themselves in flimsy blankets that cling to the shoreline. You feel their pulse, a silent drum that echoes the pulse of the moon pulling on the sea. Over countless cycles of rise and fall, sediments accumulate. Day after day, tide after tide, layers form in repetitive patterns, alternating bands of coarse and fine grains that record the passage of time more faithfully than any clock. These bands, called tidal rhythmites, are the Earth's own diary. They capture the story of each swell and ebb, preserving a record of how high the ocean rose and how far it fell. In rock strata laid down hundreds of millions of years ago, geologists one day will read these rhythmites and uncover the history of the moon's orbit, long after its face has dimmed to its modern crescent. You imagine these fossilized layers as pages in a weathered book, pressed into shale and sandstone. You trace their lines with your mind, each alternating stripe, a whisper of an ancient tide. Somewhere in these pages lie clues to the speed at which the moon once circled the Earth and how rapidly it has drifted away. Modern measurements show the moon recedes about 3.8 centimeters every year, but in these old rocks, you can see evidence of days lasting fewer hours, moons completing an orbit in just 22 of those hours. Time itself flowed faster, encouraged by a closer companion, ancient. Shorelines were arenas of constant change and endless possibility. In tide pools left behind by receding waves, creatures found safe havens, teeny arthropods, mollusks, and early fish-like forms that dared to explore both land and sea. You see their fossilized footprints in mudstone, momentary imprints preserved. For eons, these tracks speak of lives that balanced on the threshold of two worlds, shaped by the ceaseless momentum of water moving in and out. You sense how those cycles influenced evolution itself. Organisms that could tolerate drying when the tide withdrew gained an advantage. Those that could cling fast enough to withstand the next surge endured. Over generations, shells grew stronger, limbs became more adept at grasping, and internal clocks synchronized with tide schedules. Life learned the rhythm of the world, setting its own essence to the drumbeat of lunar gravity. As you drift through these memories, you pass by ancient reefs, living structures built by coral-like organisms that drew their strength from the interplay of sun and tide. These reef walls rose in shallow water, cresting where waves broke, sheltering lagoons behind them. You imagine the shock of early sunlight filtering through clear, sunlit waters, powering photosynthesis and enabling a flourish of growth. At spring tides, the reef crests bore the full brunt of the moon and sun's combined pull, scouring its surface with force. At neap tides, the calmer water allowed juvenile creatures to colonize protected pools, adding their own stories to the reef's structure. Beneath the waves, vast forests of kelp took root in later epochs, their whole clinging to submerged rocks. The swing of these underwater forests, swaying with tide-driven currents, created nursery grounds for fish and invertebrates. You sense the rustle of fronds in the current underwater breeze driven by gravity's lure, and you hear the murmur of communities sustained by these deep, dynamic waters. Over time, the moon's steady retreat altered the pace of the tides. Day by day, hour by hour, the interval between high tides lengthened. Generations of organisms adapted to one rhythm found themselves nudged toward another. Life's clock adjusted slower, gentler, yet the imprint of those rapid, ancient tides remained in the DNA of coastal species. Even today, crabs and clams carry subtle internal mechanisms, tuned to cycles their ancestors first learned when the moon shone twice as large. You drift among these living memories, buoyed by the knowledge that every creature on a modern beach bears the legacy of those primeval surges. From microscopic diatoms to great whales, all have been shaped by the oscillations of ocean and sky. In your mind, you touch the edge of a fossilized stromatolita layered mound of bacteria that built its form beneath the pull of a nascent moon. You feel its slow accretion, layer upon layer, each one marking a set of tides and a fleeting moment of time. At the same time, you sense the fragility of these records. Erosion, subduction, and mountain building have buried countless rhythmites and reef structures deep beneath continents. Some fossils remain only in fragments, hidden in shale formations or enclosed in limestone cliffs. Yet even these remnants carry whispers of ancient waters, echoes of tides that shaped the earliest continents and nurtured the first stirrings of life. You imagine future scientists, centuries from now, uncovering these clues with delicate tools, chisels, drills, and microscopes, revealing the story of our planet's dance with its satellite. They will calculate the moon's ancient orbit from the spacing of tidal bands, and reconstruct the ebb and flow of vanished seas. Their studies will connect distant epochs, knitting together a narrative of cosmic influence and biological response. In these depths of time, you find a serene perspective. The moon, you know now, smaller, slower, more distant, is but one phase in a grand, unfolding tale. Its past intimacy with Earth shaped the stage on which life first learned to stand, crawl, and swim, and its future, as it drifts outward, will continue to rewrite the rhythms of waves and shores. As you linger on this memory, the ancient tides soften into an echo that blends with the present. The moon above you now shines more faintly in the sky than the one you remember in these visions, yet its influence remains undeniable. You feel the continuity of time, the unbroken thread that ties together primeval waters and modern seas. You realize that tonight, as you rest on a familiar shoreline, you stand at the confluence of two worlds, the ancient ocean you have just visited, and the living sea you can still hear beyond your eyelids. The tides continue their age-old dance, reminding you that every swell and retreat carries both the past and the present, woven together in a cycle that began long before you were born. In this moment, you find comfort in knowing that the Earth's story is far larger than any single life, yet it includes you fully. The memory of ancient waters becomes part of your own memory, a gentle tide that rises within your thoughts and carries you toward dreams. You look up at the moon and feel a tenderness threaded through distance. She seems steady, familiar, close, enough to rest a thought upon, yet she is slowly, gently drawing away. Each year she drifts about 1.5 inches farther from Earth, roughly the width of your thumb held at arm's length when measured across 12 months. The motion is too small to see, but not too small to matter. The proof comes from light. Astronauts left mirrored panels on the lunar surface, and even now scientists aim laser pulses that leap to those mirrors and return. By timing the round trip to the split second, they watch the distance grow. The signal agrees with clues in ancient rock. The moon is slipping outward, millimeter by millimeter, century by century. Earth and moon do not move in simple circles where one orbits a motionless other. They revolve together around a mutual balance point buried deep inside Earth's body, a shifting pivot called the barycenter. As tidal forces exchange energy, that shared motion adjusts. The moon's path widens, the barycenter creeps, and the geometry of the pull that shapes your tides subtly changes. Why does she leave? Because the oceans move. When the moon pulls on Earth's water, tides rise, but Earth spins, and that spin drags the tidal bulge a little ahead of the line that points straight to the moon. Water piles forward against continents. Friction with seafloors and coasts resists the flow. That resistance steals a trace of Earth's rotational energy. Energy cannot vanish. Angular momentum, the measure of turning motion, flows outward through gravity's coupling. Earth's lost spin nudges the moon into a slightly higher orbit where she moves more slowly yet carries more energy. So the moon recedes, and Earth's day lengthens. The change is tiny on a human scale. On a human scale, only a couple thousandths of a second added to the length of the day every century or so. But deep time multiplies small things. Billions of years ago, when the moon sat closer, Earth spun faster, days were shorter, tides were stronger. Rocks from the Devonian period hold growth bands in corals that suggest days near 22 hours long. Tidal rhythmites preserved in layered stone record more days packed into ancient years. Silent ledgers kept by mud and moonlight. You breathe with that idea, time itself stretching as the moon drifts. The clock you trust is not carved in granite. It is written in water, in drag, in light that travels to a distant plane of dust and returns to say the distance has grown. Tidal energy does work. As tides run up continental shelves and funnel through straits, water rubs against the planet and mixes deep layers of the ocean. Some of the energy becomes turbulence and then heat, warmth released into seawater. Tidal mixing also helps lift nutrients and cold water toward the surface, feeding plankton blooms that begin marine food webs. Globally, this power totals on the order of a few trillion watts, a background hum of mechanical effort supplied by gravity and motion. Most of it comes from the moon. The sun contributes to, but less. You see the result along coasts. In the Bay of Fundy, the shape of narrowing arms and basin timing turns the moon's pull into towering tides that can rise higher than a house. In the Mediterranean, enclosed and out of step, the range is often modest. Local landscape can shout or whisper the same celestial request, reminding you that recession softens the note. But shoreline design sets the volume. because tidal force weakens sharply, with distance falling away roughly as 1 over the cube of separation. The moon's gradual retreat means her grip slowly eases. Average tidal ranges will, over great spans of time, tend to soften. Yet local tides are shaped by more than pull alone. The outline of coasts, the depth of basins, and the narrowings that can focus water into taller surges or spread it thin. You picture the oceans as vast bowls not yet settled. Continents slide, seaways open and close, ridges rise from seafloors. When the natural slosh period of a basin matches the timing of the tide, resonance can lift the water higher, like pushing a swing in step with its arc. If geography shifts, the music retunes. So the moon's slow farewell does not silence the ocean. It simply changes the key. Still, the direction is clear. With every outward step, the moon trades intimacy for distance, strength for subtlety. The tides become a little more restrained, a little more like the remembered swells of the wilder, closer youth you visited in ancient seas. Imagine far futures, eons from now, beyond mountains yet to rise, beyond species yet to bloom. Friction keeps transferring spin from Earth to Moon. Earth's rotation continues to slow. In theory, the dance tends toward a double calm called tidal locking, where Earth would rotate once for every circuit of the Moon, always showing the same face in return. Whether that state is ever reached before the sun swells and alters everything is uncertain. The story may end early beneath a red giant sky, but the tendency points toward rest. Old eclipse records help track this slowing. Clay tablets, caught astronomies, and later telescopes captured the moments when the moon crossed the sun or slipped into Earth's shadow. Comparing those historic timings with modern calculations reveals that Earth has indeed been easing its spin. The clock and the sky adjusting to one another with tidal friction as the mediator. Even now you live in the middle chapters, leap seconds. Added now and then, ancient corals with growth bands that tally shorter days, sediments whispering of more frequent tides. These are footnotes in the correspondence between Earth and Moon. The letter stretches across billions of years. Tonight you read a single illuminated line. There is tenderness in knowing the moon is leaving but not abandoning. Gravity does not snap. The embrace stretches, yet the two remain bound. The orbit widens, the pull softens, the promise stays. Every high tide that reaches a child's sandcastle, every low tide that uncovers feeding flats for shorebirds, carries the signature of this ongoing exchange. You press your palm to wet sand and feel the retreating foam slide past your fingers. Somewhere, deep beneath satellites and air, Earth's spin slows by an immeasurable breath. Somewhere farther out, the moon receives that breath as motion. The trade is invisible, but the sea writes the receipt across every coast. This slow exchange shapes life. Creatures that spawn on spring tides, plants that root in intertidal mud, people who launch boats on favorable current soul, live within margins defined by the moon's pull. As the pull evolves, life adapts, internal clocks adjust, coastlines migrate, cultures rewrite tide tables, engineers capture tidal power, storytellers mark festivals by the moon. Some organisms keep circadian or circatidal clocks, internal rhythms tuned to the schedule of the moon. Fiddler crabs time their courtship to low tide mudflats. Certain marine worms rise in coordinated swarms at the right lunar phase. Corals release gametes in breathtaking moon-synchronized clouds. These living metronomes may shift as tidal timing evolves, just as shoreline peoples revise calendars when harbors silt or seas advance. Consider the horseshoe crab rising at high spring tide to lay eggs in sand where shorebirds will feast. The grunion that rides surf onto beaches under a particular moon. Mangroves that breathe through roots exposed between tides. Corals that time mass spawning with lunar light. And human harvesters who wade tidal flats at the moment water withdraws. Each depends not on a fixed shoreline, but on timing a moving meeting place kept by gravity's slow negotiation. You may have held a tide table, columns of numbers predicting high and low water for months ahead. Behind each printed time lies the whole exchange of spin and orbit, friction and light. When you read such tables, you are reading the pulse of an Earth-Moon partnership still unfolding. You are mostly water yourself, though the moon does not lift you as it lifts the sea. You keep schedules set by daylight, darkness, and sometimes by the moon's phase. Festivals, fasting months, fishing seasons, sleep cycles that drift with moonrise human patterns echo the larger rhythm. In your heartbeat you find small tides, fill, release, so you rest in the widening space, listening. The distance grows, but the vow endures. The moon continues to lift the seas continue to slow the earth continues to send the moon outward. Pull, response, exchange, again, age after age. Look around any tidal shore, and you see the partnership in practice. Markers on pier pilings show scoured bands where highest waters reach. Seaweed dries and rehydrates to the schedule of the moon. Villagers set nets in creeks that flood and empty like slow lungs. Children learn where to place their sand forts by watching which high tides erase them. As generations teach these patterns forward, cultural memory becomes an extension of lunar memory. Even if the moon drifts farther, the habit of watching, adjusting, and living with the tide endures. You wonder how all these lives will continue to tune themselves as the moon's pull gradually softens, and you feel the next question rising. Like a tide within you, what does it mean to live by a moving sea together? Always, the tide slips away from your feet, leaving thin channels that shine in twilight. In their gleam, you see the lives that wait upon the next return. Crabs, grasses, mussels, people. The moon may be leaving slowly, but the world keeps living with the tide. You stand where water and land continually trade places, the margin that appears and disappears with the moon. Low tide has drawn back, laying open a broad sheet of shining sand, and the world that is usually underwater invites you in. Above, the moon's pull continues even though the water has retreated. Below your feet, countless lives are arranging themselves for the next return. You begin to see that living with the tide is less a struggle than a practiced dance. The tide is a schedule written in water. Every coast reads it differently, yet the pattern arrives for all. Roughly every 12.5 hours, the sea returns. And between those visits, it leaves space for breathing, feeding, hiding, growing. Creatures that live here keep more than one clock. They carry a daylight clock for sun and shadow, and a tide clock for moon and water. Some animals hold that tide clock inside their bodies. Their chemistry rises and falls on schedule even in laboratory darkness, as if tiny waves are moving through their cells. Scientists call these inner rhythms tidal and lunar cycles, but you might think of them as shoreline memory, a built-in reminder of when to open, when to close, when to move. In the swash zone, the sand crab buries backward in a blink. leaving only feathery antennae to comb the water rushing over sand. Each wave step marshes up the beach as the tide floods, and the crabs ride that edge, reburying again and again so food-rich foam passes over their filters. When the tide ebbs, they follow it down slope, always centering themselves where water meets air. When the water retreats farther, the exposed mudflats shine, and shorebirds hurry across them like quick strokes of ink. Beaks probe for worms and buried clams, timed to surface near low tide. Many birds learn local schedules, arriving on feeding grounds within minutes of exposure. Their migrations across oceans paced in part by the promise of food left uncovered. By the moon, barnacles glue themselves to rock and wait for water. At high tide, they open plates and sweep feathery legs to gather drifting plankton. At low tide, they seal tight against drying air. Mussel beds crowd the middle shore in dark blue bands that map the average reach of waves. Strong threads anchor each mussel so the surge does not tear the colony free. Yet the band rises or falls through years as local tides shift. Seaweeds paint the rocks in tidal stripes. Low on the shore, long kelps and flexible sargassum stay mostly underwater. Mid-level, tougher red and brown blades tolerate hours in air. High on spray-splashed stone, tiny crusts clung and wait for rare flooding. Slippery coatings hold moisture, and some tissues make sugars that work like antifreeze against drying. Even color matters, filtering light when water returns. In pooled hollows between rocks you meet miniature seas that remember the last tide. Anemones keep water cupped inside by folding their tentacles. Sculpins flick among algae forests. Chitons lock down like living shields. Temperature swings wide. Here, salt grows strong as water evaporates, and oxygen can fall low. Yet these pocket oceans persist because the next tide will arrive and reset the stage. On the upper flats, fiddler crabs rush from burrows as the mud drains. Males wave enlarged claws in bright semaphore to attract mates before rising water covers the court again. Many species time courtship and egg release to the fortnightly cycle, sending larvae into the water on nights when spring tides will carry them away from shore. Ghost crabs wait higher still, visiting the surf line under cover of darkness. Farther north, along broad estuaries, horseshoe crabs rise with evening spring tides in late warmer seasons. Armored backs grind over pebbles as pairs climb the beach. Females lay clusters of green eggs in wet sand while males crowd close. Many eggs never hatch because migrating shorebirds feast on them, gaining fuel for flights that span hemispheres. The moon feeds wings by calling ancient arthropods ashore. In warmer west coast nights, slender grunion ride breaking waves completely out of the sea. They twist in wet sand, lay and fertilize eggs, then wriggle back with the next surge. Eggs stay, buried while ordinary tides pass overhead. They wait for the stronger spring tides, whose churning releases the hatchlings, washing them into surf already rising toward open water. Out on tropical reefs, warm and clear, corals prepare in long quiet for a brief collective release. After sunset on particular nights following full moon, thousands of colonies let bundles of eggs and sperm rise like upside-down snowfall. Timing together floods the water with possibility so that chance meets chance before currents scatter it. Thin, lunar light, water temperature, and the previous tidal cycle all help set the date. In certain oceans, segmented worms spend the year hidden in reef crevices. When the right moon nears, their tail ends fill with gametes and break free as swimming swarms that rise to the surface all at once. Island communities have long harvested these brief tides of food, watching the lunar calendar as carefully as any modern tide table. Biology, tradition, and gravity meet in one shimmering ribbon. Mangrove forests and salt marshes turn tidal motion into shelter. Roots like stilts slow the water, trap sediment, and build soil that keeps rising with the sea. Twice each day, oxygen. Rich water flushes crab burrows and brings nutrients to young fish that hide among roots. When tides run especially high, floating seeds travel to new banks, planting future coastlines leaf by leaf. Many drifting larvae and small migrating fishes use selective tidal transport to move. They rise into the water column when the tide floods landward, then sink or shelter when the tide reverses, letting currents carry them step by step into nurseries up an estuary. Later, they reverse the pattern to return to sea, using the tide. Saves energy and lines their journey with predictability. Internal tides you visited in the deep help stir nutrients that fuel plankton, blooms near the surface. When microscopic algae grow, grazing zooplankton follow, and larger animals track that food. Thus a tide that begins as a subtle bend in density surfaces days later as color seen from space. The chain of response climbs from physics to chemistry, to life, linking abyss and shoreline. People learn these lessons too. Fishers plan trips around slack water that makes anchoring safer. Shell gatherers cross mudflats only during predictable low tides. Seaweed farmers tie lines at heights measured against barnacle scars that mark average reach. In some villages, drums or bells still sound to announce the evening ebb, a community pulse struck to the moon's timing. Calendars in many coastal cultures weave lunar months with working tides. Festivals greet the first big spring tide after planting. Boat races run on the long flood. Prayers rise when new moon hides in darkness and the water runs deepest. Today, engineers build tidal turbines in narrow straits, turning gravity into electricity, while navigators read digital predictions built on centuries of watching the water climb pier stones. You are mostly water, but the moon does not lift you the way it lifts the sea. Your body is held together too firmly, yet you still live by tidal cues whenever you listen to shoreline light, plan sleep by moonrise through a window, or feel mood shift with the pace of beach days. Awareness is its own tide. By noticing, you move in step with the wider rhythm without needing to be physically pulled. Stand back and the pattern enlarges. Crabs, birds, worms, corals, mangroves, people with nets and turbines all move to schedules, written first by the moon and tuned by the sun and spinning earth. Layer those countless local dances together and you begin to hear something bigger than any single shore. A planetary pulse that keeps time for trade, migration, stories, and dreams. Scientists listen to life by listening to water levels. Tide gauges fixed to piers have logged rise and fall for more than a century at some ports. Satellites now trace the height of the sea across the globe, spotting subtle bulges racing as tides through open basins and into polar seas. By comparing models with what coasts record, researchers learn how ocean basins resonate and how climate-driven sea level rise rides on top of daily lunar motion. Tidal knowledge also protects. Storm surges piled on top of high spring tides can flood cities that stand clear at other times. Evacuation plans and sea walls are drawn using the upper limits of tide plus wave and wind. Mariners read tide predictions before clearing shallow bars. Divers plan entries when currents slow near slack. What begins as gravity becomes guidance that keeps communities safer. Bart farmers of oysters and clams schedule harvest with the ebb so beds lie exposed long enough to work but not enough to dry. In tidal rice fields of some deltas, gates open on the flood to let brackish water nourish soils, then close on the ebb. Coastal cuisines grow from these timings, the savory taste of sea vegetables gathered at spring lows, the sweetness of shellfish fattened by nutrient pulses on neat night settles. You listen to bubbles crackling as the returning tide begins to creep across the flats, rewriting every track you made. Lives you watched will rearrange underwater, following clocks older than memory. Tomorrow they will meet the moon again, and so will you, whether by table, by smell of salt on air, or by longing. The pattern that guides them is guiding your attention towards something larger still. Listen closely as harbors ring with bells, as satellites track tides in passing orbits, as migratory routes, market days, power grids, and stories all lean on when the water turns. Layer biology, safety, food, culture, and measurement, and the tide becomes more than shoreline change. It becomes the planet's quiet clock. Ports read it, pilots trust it, calendars lean quietly against its rise and fall together. In the next breath you will feel that wider heartbeat, the pulse that links seas and people everywhere. You stand at the water's edge as dusk falls, feeling the ocean's steady heartbeat beneath your feet. The tide rises and falls, not merely as waves against sand, but as a planetary pulse that keeps time for life on Earth. In this moment, you breathe with the rhythm of gravity, sensing that every shrink and swell is part of a vast, silent metronome. Across the globe, humanity follows this pulse, often without knowing it. Mariners have read tide charts for centuries, guiding their ships safely over bars and into harbors. Ancient mariners carved wooden tide boards to mark safe passages, trusting patterns drawn from years of observation. Farmers who sow and harvest in coastal plains time their seasons to water's reach. In rice paddies of Asia, tidal gates flood, fields at spring tides to enrich soil, then close as the water recedes. Cities sit in harbors because tides once determined where currents would carry goods and how deep channels should be dug. Every calendar owes something to tides. Some months still echo the lunar cycle, tracing periods of ebb and flow. Festivals and markets spring up at high spring tides, when harbors brim and rivers rise. In Japan, the Orai Isozaki Shrine Festival celebrates the first clear new moon tide, drawing fishermen and priests to perform rites for safe harvests. Scottish coastal communities mark up Heliaea with torchlit processions timed to winter tides. Even our concept of weeks and months, though driven by social custom, carries the whisper of lunar patterns, softly shaping human time as the moon shapes the sea. Animals to mark this pulse. Salmon leap upstream on flood tides that carry them toward rocky spawning grounds. Sea turtles hatch and return to water when the surf is highest. Shorebirds time their migrations to low tides that reveal feeding flats. Crabs emerge to feast at night on the receding shore, their shells dry under the pale lunar glow. The living world moves in sync with what seems like silent poetry. We measure tides with gauges that record, rise and fall minute by minute. We calibrate instruments to capture the subtle tilt of Earth and the gentle tug of the sun and moon. This data powers forecasts that protect communities from storm surges and help engineers design seawalls. It also reveals how tides are changing under wind, weather, and the steady hum of climate. In the Bay of Fundy, where the range reaches over 12 meters, digital sensors track the timing and height with precision, guiding ferries and fishers alike. Still, the pulse of the planet shapes us. Human tissues are mostly water, and some research suggests that cells can respond to gravitational variations. In labs, tissues and culture show subtle cycles tied to lunar rhythms. Marine snails open, shells on schedule even under constant light. Farmers note that crops grown in certain moon phases flower sooner or yield more fruit. Fishermen pass down stories of the best times to net shrimp or trap lobsters, guided by tides that ebb and flow. Beyond any digital readout, even our language carries echoes of the tides. We speak of high spirits at spring tides and low points at Nipsa. We say emotions ebb and flow, borrowing metaphors from the sea's movement. Poets write of love as rising tides, waxing and waning with lunar breath. Authors speak of life's currents, steering our souls between hidden reefs and open seas. Architecture and city planning carry tidal memory too. Ports and piers must account for range. Bridges must clear high water at certain seasons. In Venice, each passerella over flooded streets becomes a reminder of rising tides. In Bangladesh, floating schools drift with the water. Dutch engineers built the Oosterscheldekering storm surge barrier to close at storm tides above spring thresholds. Blending cutting-edge design with centuries of tidal history, modern technology still listens to tides. Satellites measure ocean height across thousands of kilometers, mapping bulges that sweep around Earth. GPS corrections use tidal models to improve positioning for everything from autonomous ships to smartphone maps. Offshore platforms brace for tidal currents that can twist structures like blades in a dance. Sonar arrays track internal tides, revealing how deep layers rise and fall invisibly beneath the waves. When the moon's orbit shifts, these models adjust, revealing new bulges and troughs. Researchers track how melting ice and thermal expansion add a tide-like signal of sea level rise atop lunar cycles. They separate the planetary pulse from the silent heartbeat of climate, watching how humanity's warming touches tide gauges. As the moon's pull continues, unchanged in a way, society is an intertidal zone where natural rhythms meet human invention. We anchor our schedules to clocks and calendars, yet we still lean on an ancient pulse. Subconsciously, we rise toward opportunities and retreat for reflection. The world's work and rest follow tides of productivity and calm, shaped by a pattern. Older than any city's founding, factories built along estuaries, timed factory gates to slack tides so barges could deliver raw materials at ease. Tide mills once ground grain in medieval Europe, using the rising water to fill mill ponds and releasing it through water wheels at EB, turning metal gears with lunar rhythm. Today, a handful of restored tide mills still operate as cultural monuments, their paddles whispering stories of power harnessed by gravity's gentle nudge. Artists, poets, and composers have long been moved by tides, capturing their rhythms in music and verse. At coastal cathedrals, tide bells toll in hollow tubes tuned to lunar hours. Writers map emotional landscapes to tidal arcs. Architects create tidal clocks and moon phase dials that adorn public squares, crafting bridges between human creativity and nature's pulse, always softly, ever. Communities shape celebrations by high tide. The Feast of St. James in Galicia fills plazas when river tides meet the sea, drenching pilgrims with salt and blessing. In West Africa, Villagers gather during the farmer's high tide when mangrove seeds float in, planting hope for new groves. Each festival is a living hymn to the tidal pulse that threads through myth and daily life. Science listens to, in laboratories and observatories. Tide tables of the past stinked in ledgers by hand have given way to computer models that predict months in advance. Yet researchers still visit venerable tide gauges at lighthouses built centuries ago, checking that modern instruments echo. Historical readings. In UNESCO heritage sites, old tide gauge houses are conserved as reminders that watching water is watching time itself. You sense how this knowledge protects and guides. Storm surge warnings layered on top of predicted high spring tides save lives. Coastal engineers build wetlands to buffer wave energy, aligning new parks with older tidal marshes. Urban planners draw green belts at floodable heights, learning from tidal floods that once carved channels through cities. People trust the tide's reliability. Fishermen launch nets at dawn slack water, then haul in catches as the flood tide returns with shrimp running upstream. Sailors ride the ebb to exit estuaries and catch the flood to enter. Tide rips strong currents where water forces through. Narrows become playgrounds for extreme kayakers and surfers, each wave shaped by lunar alignment and rocky corridors. Even digital cultures bend toward tides. Satellite internet providers manage bandwidth in coastal areas based on flood schedules. Some marine sanctuaries restrict boating during spring tides to protect nesting birds. Environmental sensors drift on buoys timed to low tide for maintenance. And divers log into tidal apps before exploring coral walls. Human organs have circadian clocks. Some argue for a circadian clock too. Studies in fish suggest hormones cycle with lunar month, affecting reproduction and mood. In people, anecdotal accounts link sleep patterns and menstrual cycles to full and new moons. While research remains ongoing, the idea reminds you that bodies are tuned to rhythms beyond the solar day. You are mostly water, but the moon does not lift you the way it lifts the sea. Your body is held together too firmly, yet you still live by tidal cues whenever you listen to shoreline light. Plan sleep by moonrise through a window, or feel mood shift with the pace of beach days. Awareness is its own tide. By noticing, you move in step with the wider rhythm without needing to be physically pulled. Stand back and the pattern enlarges. Crabs, birds, worms, corals, mangroves, tide mills, scientists, festivalgoers, sailors, suburban families all move to schedules written first by the moon and tuned by the sun and spinning earth. Layer those countless local dances together and you begin to hear something bigger than any single shore. A planetary pulse that beats beneath our cities, farms, labs, and homes as the evening deepens. You feel the warmth of human ingenuity weaving around nature's command. You sense that our architectures, calendars, and devices are tributaries to the same great ocean of time. The pulse of the planet flows onward, silent but certain, inviting you to pause and listen. Tonight, when you close your eyes, you carry that pulse within. You become a witness to tides in your heart, to calendars in your mind, to migrations in your dreams. You lie between worlds personal and planetary, connected by the motion of water, and as sleep draws near, you realize that every breath, every beat echoes the tides. You sense an invitation to listen more closely to the sky's silent cadences, to the moon's distant voice amid the stars, beneath the glow of moonlight. Scientists stand on piers and cliffs, ear to sea and eye to horizon. They place buoys in open water, sensors on pilings, and laser reflectors on distant shores. Each instrument reaches out, listening for the faintest swell, the slowest drift, the precise moment when water begins its gentle rise. You feel their patience, the way they lean in when the world is hushed, waiting for a whisper of pattern beneath the waves. Along coasts, tide gauges have kept careful records for centuries. In old lighthouses, simple float systems once traced water height on paper charts curled beside lanterns and logbooks. Mariners' notebooks reveal observations of high tides under full moons, spring tides that crept into docks, and neap tides that barely brushed barnacles. Each handwritten note is a small echo of knowledge, passed from one generation of watchers to the next. Modern scientists build on these legacies. They launch satellites into orbit, mapping the height of the ocean. From space, radar pulses bounce off the sea surface, returning data that traces tidal bulges expanding across basins. From these measurements, researchers create tidal models that predict when harbors will fill, when currents will shift, and how rising sea levels ride atop lunar cycles. You imagine the satellites drifting in silence, their eyes fixed on Earth's blue heartbeat dot out on the water. Autonomous gliders slip through currents, recording temperature, salinity, and depth as they follow tidal flows. Beneath their sleek hulls, sensors measure pressure changes in the deep, revealing internal tides pulsing through layers. These machines drift where human divers rarely go, charting hidden valleys and ridges, mapping the way water moves when gravity calls. They tell stories of underwater waves that rise and fall like ghostly echoes of surface tides. Acoustic recorders rest on the seafloor, capturing the sound of moving water and shifting sediment. Researchers play back these recordings, listening for the hush of internal tides slipping over submarine ridges, or the rumble of currents pushing through narrow straits. Each vibration carries information about flow, speed, direction, and energy. You sense the reverence in each recorded note, the way scientists treat noise as music to be decoded. In high-latitude seas, drifting profilers rise and fall with tides, sampling water that mixes cold polar currents with warmer flows. They reveal how tidal mixing shapes global circulation, carrying nutrients from abyssal plains to sunlit layers. At research stations on rocky shores, instruments measure how sea ice moves with tidal cycles, cracking and shifting under lunar pull. Polar scientists watch these motions through long winters, each crack an index of tidal strength under ice. Geologists study tidal rhythmites preserved in sedimentary rock. In desert badlands, layers of ancient mud record patterns of high and low water from eons past. By counting the thickness of daily bands and annual sequences, they reconstruct the moon's orbit through deep time. Fossilized ripple marks and sandstone strata tell of rare tidal bores that surged up ancient rivers, of bay shapes that amplified lunar swells, of continents arranged differently under a younger sky. In museums, you admire antique tide machines, complex clockwork gears, driven by hand-cranked drums with perforated papers encoding tidal cycles. These mechanical marvels once guided shipping routes and fishing fleets. Enthusiasts still restore them, marveling at how elegantly gear ratios and cams reproduced lunar and solar harmonies. Such devices remind you that human curiosity has always followed the water's lead. Educational programs install simple tide gauges in schoolyards, inviting children to chart daily highs and lows, to tie data to the moon's phase. Students learn that even a humble yardstick can reveal larger patterns. They share findings online, comparing charts from distant beaches and discovering that high tide in one hemisphere is low in another. These young observers join a global chorus, each measurement a note in the planet's tidal song. Coastal managers use this knowledge to protect communities. Tide forecasts inform evacuation plans when storm surges threaten low-lying cities. Engineers design seawalls and breakwaters calibrated to the highest predicted spring tide, plus an allowance for waves and wind. Ecologists plan wetland restoration by tracking ideal inundation frequencies for marsh plant growth. You feel their care as they listen to the moon's instructions for land and life. Fisheries biologists deploy acoustic tags on fish, tracking their movements through tidal currents. They discover spawning migrations synchronized with rising spring tides, feeding fronts following neap tides, nursery habitats shaped by ebb and flow. Each tagged fish becomes a messenger, carrying data in its path. When researchers map these movements, they see shimmering corridors of life that pulse in time with gravity's pull. Humanitarian efforts lean on tidal models after tsunamis. Relief workers need to know slack water times for safe entry into damaged ports. Freshwater wells near coasts risk saltwater intrusion at high tides, guiding where and when to drill. In island nations, tidal data underpins renewable energy projects, tidal turbines that spin most efficiently at peak spring tides, storing power for nights of calm. On remote islands, indigenous communities maintain oral traditions of tide knowledge. Elders recite star maps that show lunar rising points and high water markers etched in rock. They teach younger generations to read signs in the sky and in the sand patterns in bird flights. Humidity shifts signaling neap low tides, lunar halos predicting stronger surges. This ancestral wisdom blends with scientific methods, creating hybrid maps of memory and measurement. You hear of collaborative projects where modern tools meet traditional knowledge. Researchers take community dreams about shifting shorelines and test them with satellite imagery. Villagers recount decades-old changes in fish spawning grounds that match sediment cores, showing altered tidal channels. Together, they co-create resilience plans rooted in both the moon's cycles and the rhythms of everyday life. In art galleries, you find exhibits of tide-inspired works. Installations use real-time tide data to animate lights or sounds. A sculpture might glow brighter during spring high tides, dim during napes, pulsing like a lantern in sync with the sea. Musicians compose pieces whose tempo follows the tides. Schedule, interweaving lunar phase with melody. You feel the creative reach of tides, moving beyond science into human expression. Public aquariums host tide reef tanks that mimic real tidal cycles, raising and lowering water levels to simulate reef flats. Visitors witness corals and fish adapting to the ebb and flow, gaining respect for the subtle dynamics that sustain ecosystems. Behind the scenes, aquarists calibrate pumps and valves to the precise timing of local tides, ensuring that creatures experience conditions much like their wild homes. Imagine mapping the world's tidal energy potential through interactive digital globes. You spin the globe and watch color-coded lines mark currents at spring and nape, identifying narrow channels where turbines could spin. Engineers model the environmental impact on fish, passage, and sediment. The digital map merges physics and ecology, balancing power needs with conservation, always guided by lunar motion. In coastal libraries, you find old maritime almanacs, dusty pages filled with daily tide tables printed for ports around the globe. Historians trace shipping routes and colonial expansion through records of safe harbor access, linking economic lifelines to ocean's mood. You leaf through these pages, sensing the weight of voyages planned by high tide windows and low tide clearances. Even deep ocean cables lie where tidal currents are gentlest to minimize strain. Subsea engineers design routes that dodge strong spring tide channels and deep sea ridges that amplify internal tides. They attach cables to the seafloor in ways that flex with hidden swells, ensuring that undersea communications survive the moon's silent tug. As you listen to these many voices, satellites, journals, and the memories of elders, you sense that knowledge grows not in sudden leaps, but in gentle accumulations. Each new instrument adds a layer to the understanding we inherit. Each recovered journal page strengthens the pattern. Science is a tide of curiosity, rising slowly, retreating for reflection, then surging again with fresh insight. You, too, become a listener. You feel the urge to measure, to record, to share what you see when the sea reaches toward moonlight. You understand that listening itself is an act of love, a way of acknowledging the moon's presence in every wave, every ebb, every breath of water against the hull. Science does not finish the story. It invites you to join, to lean in when the tide is high, to peer into tide pools when it is low, to record the rise and fall of your own attention. In each measurement, you become part of a community that spans piers and polar coasts, research labs and village shores, telescopes above and submarines below. The collective curiosity swells like a spring tide, lifting our shared understanding. Tonight, as you rest in moonlit calm, you carry that tide of knowledge within. You know that each breath and heartbeat echoes the rhythms measured by generations of listeners. The ocean's story is not told once, but told again in every gauge reading, every satellite pass, every whispered observation of a distant shore. And as you drift toward sleep, you wonder, how will your own voice add to the chorus of observers who listen to the moon's quiet call? And as you drift towards sleep, you wonder, how will your own voice add to the chorus of observers who listen to the moon's quiet call? You are born of stardust and ocean, a tapestry woven by cosmic forces and the simple geometry of water molecules. Your body, nearly 3/4 water, holds within it the gentle sway of tides. When you breathe, when your heart beats, you echo the rhythm set by the moon's embrace. Each cell responds in subtle harmony to the same gravity that guides the sea's rise and fall. In this quiet moment before sleep, you feel connected to every wave that lapped ancient shores, to every ebb that carved hidden channels in submerged valleys, to every pulse that stirred the depths of time. You are both observer and participant in this lunar tide, a single note in a grand symphony of moving water. Your blood, your sweat, the dew on your skin, the vapor of your breath are part of the eternal flow that runs from ocean to air. When the moon pulls on the sea, it pulls on you too. You may not feel your weight rising, but your fluids sense the subtle tug. In the cycles of your body's functions, sleep, digestion, mood, there are whispers of lunar timing. Scientists study these patterns and find that even humans carry a faint rhythm linked to the moon's phases. Whether or not you keep a tide clock on your wall, your own tides shape moments of reflection, emotion, and rest. Imagine your life as a shoreline, with memories like pebbles scattered across the sand. High memories, bright and full like spring, tides under full moon. Low memories, quiet and drawn back like neap tides. You visit both shores in dreams, collecting thoughts and emotions that wash in and out. In slumber, you drift beyond the visible coast, traveling along the moon's path, voyaging between tidal bulges in your mind. Your pulse is a small tide. Each beat sends a wave of pressure through vessels of fluid, expanding and contracting in a cycle of renewal. Your breath, too, is the sea of air in your lungs, drawn in when the sky is open to the moon and released when you exhale into dreams. The moon's pull on your body is unceasing. It guides not only oceans, but also the essence of living things. The earth beneath you spins, and you spin with it, so fast that at the equator you travel over 1,000 kilometers every hour. Yet you feel no dizziness, because everything moves together: the air, the water, the ground, and you. The rotation of the planet and the orbit of the moon combine to produce the tides that cradle Earth's water. You too are cradled, held in place by gravity's steady arms. Life on Earth learned its earliest rhythms in intertidal pools, where simple organisms adapted to periods of submersion and exposure. That legacy runs in your veins. In your mind, patterns bloom like starfish on rock, tracing the moon's influence through cycles of sleep and wake, of thought and rest. You carry these ancient lessons within you, a living archive of evolutionary tides. In times of stress, you may imagine the ocean's power as overwhelming. Yet the moon's pull is neither harsh nor sudden. It is patient, relentless, and gentle. Your own challenges behave like tides, sometimes surging with emotion, sometimes retreating into calm. If you watch carefully, you notice the cycle, the gathering and releasing of energy, and you find solace in knowing that calm follows every surge. When you gaze at water, whether in a glass or a sea, you witness your own reflection and your own nature. You are water shaped by boundaries, given form by skin and bone, yet never free from ripple. The moon guides the sea's form, but continents, islands, and your own form guide the water within you. You are both container and current, shaping and shaped by the pull. In the rhythm of tides, there is a lesson about balance. The sea does not race to the shore. It rises in measured, patient grace. When it recedes, it does so without regret, leaving pools of memory and pockets of life. You too can rise without hurry and withdraw without fear, finding life in every moment between extremes. Think of the moon as a companion whose presence you feel more than you see. Even when clouds hide her, her gravity continues its work. So, to do unseen influences shape your demaries, hopes, unseen connections with others. You may not perceive all the forces that move you, but you respond to them within. When you dream, you travel without moving. You visit shores you have never seen. You swim in seas of thought and emotion. You drift on currents carried by memory. The moon's call guides these dreams, tugging gently on the water of your mind. You encounter ancient oceans, future waves, and hidden depths, all woven in the tapestry of sleep. Your life unfolds in cycles, shaped by the moon's steady orbit. Monthly phases mark time in calendars, in cultural rituals, in personal rhythms. You might plant in the dark of new moon, harvest in the brightness of full moon, rest in the halfway phases. The choices you make can follow the tide, guiding your actions by a pattern that predates any human clock. Even when technology lets us measure every centimeter of tide, you find deeper meaning in the unseen cycles of heart and breath. You remember that science and poetry share a language of rhythm. The number of days between new moons finds its echo in the number of nights between dreams. Trends in ocean height become trends in mood, in music, in movement of the city. In your quietest moments, you sense an invitation to listen more deeply, to the world around you, to the sea within you, to the sky above you. The moon's pull is a reminder that gravity connects everything. Each molecule in your body was part of the deep ocean, part of the air, part of the Earth's crust, part of a star that exploded. You are connection incarnate. As you drift towards sleep, you carry the memory of tides in your senses, the taste of salt, the sound of waves, the vision of moonlight on water. You hold the weight of the moon in your bones, the shape of countenance in your cells, the breath of oceans in your lungs. You are the moon's passenger and fellow traveler. Moved by tides you cannot fully see, your thoughts ride currents of memory and imagination, swirling in patterns guided by lunar cycles. Emotions rise like spring tides of laughter, pressing against the shores of consciousness, and recede like neap tides of calm, leaving behind pools of reflection. Your mind is an ocean of ideas shaped by boundaries of experience, yet capable of overflow when creativity surges. In quiet moments, you sense the moon's pull in your thoughts, a reminder that every idea begins in the fluid interplay between light and gravity, beyond your own body. The moon's influence touches ecosystems, vast and small. Forests near the coast feel subtle shifts in groundwater levels as tides push and pull aquifers, guided by underground veins of water. In arid zones, tidal effects on subterranean water can mean the difference between drought and sustenance for plants and animals. You realize that the moon's grasp extends beyond visible shores, reaching into hidden realms beneath your feet. As you touch the ground, you sense the tide's footstep echoing underground. Consider the whales and birds that traverse oceans, guided by sound and tide. Humpback whales sing songs that can travel for kilometers, their melodies riding on tidal currents, connecting pods across vast spaces. Albatross gliders ride wind and tide in endless loops over the sea, trusting lunar timing to deliver them to feeding grounds. Sea turtles navigate by lunar cues, returning to natal beaches under specific phases. You, too, carry the imprint of these migrations in your consciousness, feeling kinship with every creature drawn to water's edge. Human culture has long celebrated the cosmic partnership of moon and sea with dances, songs, and ceremonies. Lunar festivals bloom around the world, dances by firelight on tropical islands, poetry recitals beneath harvest moons in farmlands, midnight vigils on cliff edges where waves sing back to the sky. Artists paint seascapes touched by silver light. Composers write music that swells and falls like a tide. Architects design buildings that frame moonrise, creating windows aligned with lunar, rising points so that rooms glow with borrowed brilliance. You carry the responsibility of stewardship for this delicate dance. You decide to plant mangrove saplings at the water's edge to learn tide patterns before wading into conservation efforts. You map local tidal cycles, teaching children how high water reaches at spring tides, guiding them to build forts where waves will not wash away their dreams. You commit to listening to recording shoreline changes, to watching internal currents through temperature readings, to noting how tides shift with changing climate. In the final rhythm before sleep, you feel the embrace of the moon and the sea. Within you, your body relaxes as waves of thought settle, leaving gentle ripples of gratitude. You drift in the cradle of gravity, rocked by a current that has carried stardust and life for eons. You are both distinct and intertwined, self-shaped by water, by sky, by rock. As you hover at the edge of waking and dreaming, you become part of an endless ocean of consciousness, carried by tides that connect molecules to galaxies, memories to futures, moments to eternity. You consider the rocks beneath your feet, ancient stones that bear the imprint of tides no longer present. Limestone cliffs etched by millennia of surging water, sandstone platforms layered by tidal rhythmites, basalt columns cooled by ancient seas, all tell stories of change and continuity. In these stones, you read the poetry of gravity, the moon's departure, the Earth's evolving spin, the reshaping of coastlines through epochs. Your own lifespan is but a breath in this epic cycle, yet you belong to the unfolding narrative of water and time now. As you lie poised between wakefulness and dreams, you sense the boundary between self and sea dissolving. You are carried by memory and possibility into a realm shaped by lunar light. In the hush of night, gravity's soft arms envelop you, rocking you gently into rest. The rhythm of tides will continue without you aware, yet you participate in every cycle through. Your breath, your pulse, your very being. Sleep beckons like a calm shore beyond the horizon, promising renewal in the moon's embrace. In this shared current of existence, you realize that the moon's pull links the tiniest drop of water in your veins to the vast expanse of ocean. Each molecule vibrates with ancient memory, echoing the first tides that shaped life. Your dreams will carry you across lunar seas, tracing the path of every wave you have ever known. Tomorrow you will wake to new light, guided still by the same gravity that cradles both ocean and human heart. You rest in that knowing, part of the tide.